Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to unravel a seriously fascinating biomechanical mystery, one that has literally puzzled equestrians, trainers, and veterinarians for decades. We're looking at the true anatomy of a breakdown. It's really a journey into the invisible forces, the hidden adaptations, and the remarkable ways an animal's body manages strain, right up until it suddenly can't.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Picture this. You've got a horse, right? And their conformation is absolutely spot on. They breeze through their vet checks, the training program is well-paced, perfectly appropriate. By all standard measures, this system is incredibly healthy. Yet, seemingly out of nowhere, the horse breaks down. They stop progressing, they fluctuate between good and poor performance, or they sustain an injury that just doesn't make any sense given their pristine track record. So why does this happen? How does a healthy system just collapse?
Well, to solve this, we've got to completely shift how we look at the problem. For the longest time, the old-school approach was basically to just hunt for a broken part. The assumption was always that failure originates from a single defect or some pathology within the horse itself. We'd assess conformation, investigate the pathology, tweak the training, and basically assume something was inherently wrong with the animal. But the new scientific view, the real paradigm shift we're exploring today, tells us something entirely different. Horses don't fail because of a single defective part. They fail because of a profound mismatch. It's a misalignment between complex interacting systems.
To understand exactly how this happens, here is our roadmap. 1. The myth of sudden failure. 2. System, load, and environment. 3. 5 types of mismatch. 4. The illusion of stability. 5. Identifying the collapse point. And 6. Preventing failure through alignment.
All right, Chapter 1. The myth of sudden failure.
So the crucial point here is that what we perceive as a sudden breakdown, it's almost never a sudden event. That visible failure is actually the grand finale, the dramatic endpoint of a very long, highly invisible process. You see, movement doesn't just come from one place. It emerges from a massive, synchronized interaction. You've got the thoracic sling regulating how load is transferred. You've got the ribcage sternum system shaping how force is distributed and balanced. Then there are these vast fascial networks transmitting forces across different regions, and adipose tissue, which is essentially fat, modifying how that force is actually experienced by the body. Each part might be completely healthy on its own, but if they aren't communicating and interacting smoothly, the entire structure is compromised.
Chapter 2. System, load, and environment. Now, what's really interesting here is that to really grasp how and why a breakdown occurs, we have to look at the power of 3. The 3 primary characters in our biomechanical story. These 3 domains absolutely must get along, or the foundation just starts to crack. First up, we have the system. This is the horse's internal capacity and organization, basically how force is generated and transmitted through the body. Next, we have the load. This is the demand. We aren't just talking about the weight of a rider, but the specific discipline demands, the sheer repetition, the need for precision and power. And third, we have the environment. These are your external conditions, things like surface stiffness, tack, terrain, all the stuff that modifies how force is applied and returned. None of these domains cause failure all by themselves. It's the interaction between them that determines success or failure.
Chapter 3. 5 types of mismatch.
So, what exactly happens when the internal system, the external load, and the environment just stop speaking the same language? We get what's known as a mismatch, and there are 5 specific ways this can go down. First is a mechanical mismatch, where the horse's internal organization just doesn't align with the type of load demanded. Think of it like asking a system built for sustained, careful control to suddenly generate massive peak forces. Second is a temporal mismatch, which is all about timing. Imagine the ground reaction force returning to the horse either a fraction too early or too late compared to the horse's natural stride cycle. Third is a tissue mismatch, where the body's fat and fascia either provide way too much buffering when you actually need precision or not enough buffering when those peak forces get dangerously high. Fourth is an environmental mismatch, like a stiff surface returning force way too rapidly for the horse's system to absorb. And finally, coordination mismatch, where internal systems simply lose their synchronization and fall completely out of phase with one another.
And the reality is these mismatches rarely, if ever, happen in a vacuum. A mechanical mismatch might trigger a coordination mismatch, right? Which is then severely worsened by an environmental mismatch, like a sudden change in riding surface. They just compound upon one another, weaving these incredibly complex patterns of dysfunction deep within the horse.
Which brings us to Chapter 4, the illusion of stability.
And this brilliantly illustrates the most insidious part of our whole mystery.
If all these mismatches are compounding, why doesn't the horse just, limp or stop? Well, because the body is an absolute master at covering it up. When a mismatch occurs, the body doesn't just halt, it compensates. Fascial networks step in to spread the localized overload across wider areas. Adipose tissue reorganizes to buffer the new pressures. The horse subtly alters its movement patterns just to get the job done. And as this happens over and over, the compensatory pattern stabilizes. The horse looks fine, performs reliably, and shows zero obvious dysfunction. But it's a total illusion. The system has essentially trapped itself in a rigid state of compensation, burning excess energy and dramatically reducing its adaptability just to maintain the appearance of stability.
Chapter 5. Identifying the collapse point.
But, you can only maintain a cover-up for so long. Eventually, we reach the climax of our narrative. The beautifully orchestrated compensation runs out of room, and the system finally shatters. We call this the collapse point. There's a fantastic, kind of geeky aha moment here. Time to failure is directly proportional to the capacity for compensation. What this means is that when a sudden breakdown occurs, it's not because a sudden injury just happened out of the blue. It means the horse's system finally totally ran out of new ways to compensate for the underlying mismatch. The delay between the initial problem and the visible failure, it's really just a measure of how good the horse was at hiding it.
So that visible failure usually happens when a specific trigger acts as the final straw, pushing the system way past its limits. It could be a spike in intensity, where higher force demands expose hidden inefficiencies. It could be fatigue, which just breaks down the body's ability to maintain its careful compensations. It could be asymmetry, like that sudden directional amplification of load you get when you're cantering on a curve. A sudden surface change, like shifting from soft to stiff footing, can violently disrupt the horse's established timing. Even simple transition points between gaits, or honestly, just the cumulative load of repetition over time, can be the very thing that finally breaks the illusion of stability.
Finally, Chapter 6. Preventing failure through alignment.
Let's move to how this builds into something super empowering. Because sudden failure is the predictable result of long-term misalignment, we actually have an incredible amount of power to be proactive here. We don't have to just wait around to diagnose an inevitable failure. So here's the practical path to alignment. First, you identify the dominant mismatch. Is it a timing issue, a mechanical issue, an environmental issue? Second, you adjust the load so it sits safely within the system's current capacity. Third, you modify the environment. Maybe that means tweaking the surface properties or the saddle fit. Fourth, and this is absolutely critical, you restore variability to the system by introducing controlled variation in movement so the horse isn't just locked into a single compensatory rut. Fifth, you closely monitor indicators like balance and rhythm. And sixth, you manage this progression constantly over time, because alignment isn't just a one-and-done fix, it's an ongoing dynamic dialogue with the animal's biology.
Which leaves us with a pretty fundamental question to think about. When we look at performance, health, and athletic longevity, are we just crossing our fingers and waiting for things to break so we can fix them? Or are we going to step up, recognize the complex interactions at play, and actively keep the system, the load, and the environment perfectly aligned?